Brian. 10, 9, 8, 7.
Test, test. Got it? Right. Perfect.
Two, but there's a number of seats up front here if anybody is standing and wants to not be standing for the next 2 hours. Good evening. Good evening. So for those of you in the back, there are a handful of seats up here up front if anybody wants to not be standing. So feel free to make your way to some seats, or you can stay standing. It doesn't matter. Anyway, welcome to Matter. My name is Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO here, and tonight is going to be one of the most interesting nights that we've had since we opened Matter 3 years ago. So we created Matter as a way to get healthcare solutions to market faster that solve the most meaningful problems in healthcare, and to build collaborations that can help entrepreneurs and innovators across the whole industry identify the right problems to solve, build those solutions, and get those solutions to market. Today, we work with about 200 healthcare startup companies all over the world. We have 70 corporate and institutional partners that we're working with to really understand the market and help accelerate the development of those technologies into the market that can really help patients and help people live better lives. About a year ago, we met the people from Three Lakes Partners and developed a relationship, and many of you were here about 9 months ago for the kickoff of this IPF Catalyst Challenge last April. So since then, we've had a chance, and many of you have gotten to know Ken Bach and Elizabeth Estes, who spend most of their lives on airplanes flying around the world. The two of them collectively have, I believe, met with 7,942 of the world's experts in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and together with Tom Hervis have really been changing the way that the world understands this disease and the focus that people are placing on finding solutions for this condition. So Tom Hervis, who many of you know and who we've had the pleasure of getting to know, lost his wife to this condition, and has really charged us and charged Elizabeth and Ken and charged a number of other people in this room with helping to build awareness for this condition and find solutions that can really change the trajectory of this disease and help people who are living with the condition. So for the last 9 months, we've been working on this Catalyst Challenge. We have touched tens of thousands of people around the world. We've held events in Boston and San Francisco. We've held events here. We had hundreds of entrepreneurs register for this particular challenge, and we have touched people on multiple continents who are now thinking about this condition and thinking about ways that they can solve it. And frankly, a year ago, I had never heard of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Now it rolls off the tongue. I talk about it all the time, and am explaining it all the time, and as are many other members of our community who have really become energized by the passion of the folks at Three Lakes to really find and develop solutions for this condition. So tonight is the culmination of the IPF Catalyst Challenge. You're going to hear from 9 amazing teams from around the world who were selected and are the winners of the first round of the competition, who will be presenting their solutions. 3 of them will split up $1 million and walk out of here 333,333 farther along in their quest to bring solutions to market that can really change the course of the lives of people with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And the our MC for the evening will be Elizabeth Estes, who many people know as E. Many people know her as the whirling dervish of IPF. Many people have seen her on airplanes and in different continents. She is technically the Chief Marketing Officer of Three Lakes Partners, but that is a description that just doesn't seem to quite fit the energy and the passion and the commitment that she really brings to this issue and this condition and this population. And so one of Tom Purvis's mantras is talk is cheap and get it done. And so with that, let's bring up Elizabeth and start getting things done. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve. You know, when we first conceived of this idea of a challenge, Matter stepped up right away and said, we want to be a part of this. And they've done so over the last 9 months and really over the last year with class and dependability. And actually, we've had a lot of fun putting it together. So to Steve, to Melissa, to Saidi, to James, to everybody at Matter, thank you so much for your partnership on this. The food looked great. I don't know if any of you saw that. The bar is perfect. Always good alcohol from you guys, so we appreciate that. So thank you very much. As Steve said, I'm the Elizabeth Estes, the Chief Marketing Officer of Three Lakes Partners, and we are very excited tonight to have these 9 teams here, to have the culmination, and to give away $1 million. Our journey here, as Steve said, started in April, and for those of you who were here, you may remember this, but the mayor came. He was late. We yelled at him a little bit, but it didn't matter. He was late. The mayor was here. We had a 2-day seminar with some of the top experts in the world for IPF, and they were here in the room with us, and then we launched what is known right now still as the largest healthcare challenge in the Midwest, one of the largest healthcare challenges in the country. For those of you who are here to see the innovators and don't know a lot about the disease, we've put some straws on the chair, some coffee stirrers on the chair, and if you've never heard of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and you want to know what that feels like, try breathing through a coffee stirrer, because that's what these patients live with every day. I also know that we have a lot of patients or some patients in the crowd. If you're a patient or a caregiver of IPF patient, would you raise your hand? Oh, caregivers, patients back here in the back. And thank you for being here. And if you're a clinician or someone or a nurse practitioner or a pulmonary rehab person who takes care of patients, would you raise your hand? So for those of you who don't know, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis has no known cause and no known cure. We refuse to believe that there isn't a cure. Tom makes us believe, and we believe we just haven't found it yet. As many people will die of IPF this year as die of breast cancer, and it's still relatively unknown. And I said the night of the launch, and I'll say it again, to those of us involved in Three Lakes, this is personal. My best friend's dad died of this disease. Our managing director, Ken Bach, his mentor is fighting this disease as we speak. And the family, the Hervis family, who created this and who have enabled all of this and all that we've done over the last year, lost their matriarch in July of 2015. It's their mission we're carrying out tonight to bring awareness to this disease, wisely fund things that we believe can move the needle with big scientific gains, and then find innovators and entrepreneurs who will bring their brain power and their passion and their ideas to improve the quality of life of patients and caregivers. So Tom does say talk is cheap, so let's get her done. I want to thank some of the judges on the first round of this before we introduce the teams tonight. And there are some of them who are in the room. We had 21 judges on the first round of this. We had a couple hundred, almost 300 people who started on the process, 62 who filled out the application. We were hoping for 30, and we got 62, so we were excited about that. And now down to the 9. And 3 of those, as Steve mentioned, will walk away with $333,000. The judges who are in the room tonight, if they can stand up really quickly, Ravi Ramachandran from Patients Like Me. I don't know if Harold's here, but Al Rizzo, Dr. Al Rizzo from the American Lung Association. Bill Athenson from Three Lakes. Bill Vick, who you're going to hear from later, patient advocate. Steve Collins from Matter. Ken Bach from Three Lakes Partners. I don't think Andy Burrows from IDEO is here, but they're our partner. There's Harold Wimmer from the American Lung Association. Perfect timing, Harold. Wave your hand. Ben Curry from Maracay. Ivan Rosas, Dr. Rosas is on his way, and he was also one of the judges. Melissa Lederer, and I mentioned Al. So thank you to all of you. As I mentioned, we're super excited about the 9 teams who are here tonight, and we think you will be as well. There's a great mix. There's small companies, large companies, academia, industry, solutions for oxygen, daily living, education, and more. And the 3 teams that'll walk away with the $330,000, but we're excited tonight to add a twist to this. So, there's going to be a 4th prize, chosen by you at home who are watching this, and chosen by you in the room, and it'll be a $50,000 prize. So when this is all over, and we're doing this to encourage you to pay attention to these prezos, take notes. You have a nice pamphlet, take notes, and when this is all over, we're going to put up a link, and you're going to be able to vote. Now, I know we're in Chicago, where we vote early and often, but we're going to tell you that you can only do 1 vote. We're going to take the first 500 votes, and we're going to cut it off after 10 minutes. So pay attention to these. And what we're really trying to do is to understand these solutions that you're about to see. Are they meaningful? Are they impactful? Are they sustainable? And are they feasible? So think about that. Can this be done? And will this have an impact on these patients' lives and these caregivers' lives? Because that is why we're here. So the other thing that I want to say is all of the teams, and you heard this today at lunch, we had a great lunch today. They drew out of a hat the old-fashioned way to decide the order. So that's the order they're going to go tonight. But all of them are going to win, because the reason we did this is we wanted to source great ideas from all over the world. And standing before you is an international group of people, and when I say that, I mean it, from London, from Scotland, from Ireland, from the Netherlands, from all over the world, and from here in the United States. And they are the best and the brightest. And we know that we will continue the conversation. So although 4 of you will walk away with checks tonight, what you have promised from all of us at Three Lakes is a continued conversation to help you continue your journey so that we can help these patients and caregivers. So we were fortunate in this journey, speaking of, to find a great partner to help us. So I'm going to bring up Jason Morgan from Common Pool. I don't know if you in the contest world have heard of Common Pool, but they are the premier company in this space. Jason Morgan is the CEO, and Jason and his team have done an unbelievable job helping us get this ready, bring it to life. They just finished the $100 million MacArthur Prize. Is that right? A few more zeros. And you just finished a prize with J&J, which was $1 million. And I said earlier, wait a minute, J&J is like a how many $1 trillion company and been around 130 years? They could only come up with $1 million? What's that about? Just kidding. I'm just kidding. So, Jason, if you could talk a little bit about the judging, and I mentioned this earlier, the meaningful, the feasible, the sustainable, and the integrated. Can you talk a little bit about the judging to this point and the scoring rubric and the process that we used to get to these 9 finalists? Mike?
What you see here are the labels, the 4 criteria that we use to find our 9 finalists. But I think what makes this competition special is the transparency, the openness, the fairness that we delivered. Let me ask real quickly, how many people in this room have ever written a grant or had to raise money for a company? Keep your hands up. Okay. If it was a positive experience, you can keep your hands up. All right. Exactly. And so the problem with that is that at the end of the day, impact investing, philanthropy, this is becoming more of a transactional business, right? And when we find ourselves on the sell side of that table, too often we really don't know what these funders are looking for, right? It's almost impossible to decode that, right? And so you go into the room or you put together your deck and you wait and you talk to an analyst. The analyst is bragging about how they look at 400 PowerPoints a year and Fund 5, and you're thinking, how should this work, right? Why can't this be a value-added experience? Why can't this be a positive experience? And if it is, can't we all agree that would help lift the whole field, right? If we really know what they wanted, if we really know what they were looking for, could that become a process where you got, say, feedback from credible authorities, right? Where you could meet and greet other people that were trying to solve the same problem. And that's what we tried to deliver here. So if you go to the website today, you can see exactly what the application requirements were, exactly what this rubric was. It's a very detailed tool. You can see exactly who the judges were. We even published the normalization algorithm on the website so that if I get assigned 5 hard scores and he gets assigned 5 easy graders, we're treated the same mathematically. And so what we believe is that feedback that comes through those judges is actually a big part of the draw, the incentive that helps inform all of these teams.
We had, each one was judged 5 to 6 times, and we had so many that we had to add extra judges at the end. So it was quite the process. And I think that the people who were involved in it, I even think the people who didn't make the top 9 believe that it was done in a fair and equitable manner, and we wanted to make sure that we did that all the way through. You know, it seems like in innovation, and we have to address this because you do work with the biggest names in healthcare and other fields, but healthcare specifically. Feels like in healthcare we're at a tipping point a bit of acceleration with innovation in healthcare generally. Where for many decades we haven't. We've been archaic, as Eric Topol would say. We've been archaic and stayed and never moved. Do you feel that? Do you see that as you're out seeing these competitions and these entrepreneurs and innovators?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I think that the economics of healthcare are very peculiar, right? And when we talk about healthcare delivery systems, technologies, products, I think too often we forget that agency mostly exists within the buyers, right? Sometimes those are not the patients. It's an insurance company or it's a hospital group. And taking some of the power away from the patients, right, means that sometimes we get products that don't exactly meet their needs. And as technology is evolving and as some of these adaptations are becoming more affordable, more available, we're seeing a lot more attention on the patient themselves. And so we really like to think of kind of the human-centered design aspect of what's really happening in healthcare today. We also like to see a lot of kind of the cross-disciplinary research that's happening today. So data scientists are working with biologists. You know, we're looking at machine learning. We're looking at different ways to configure technology.
A little like a healthcare renaissance.
I think so. I think there's a large renaissance cutting across a lot of these verticals.
So you saw these finalists. What did you find interesting?
What did I find interesting?
Put them on the spot here.
You know, I think it's the diversity, right? It's hard to ask a very open-ended question, like how would you improve quality of life for patients suffering from IPF and expect to deliver a rigorous and a valid process, right? And then to have produced this variety, this diversity of these finalists is really impressive. You know, you're going to hear from all the teams. They're quite different. They're quite different, but yet they still represent the best and brightest out of this larger stack that we were able to attract.
Any predictions?
Predictions. I'm also a judge, so it would be wrong of me to say. But I will say this: I do attend a lot of these things, a lot of these pitch presentations, and I think when you're up here and you're pitching to the room, too often it's easy to think if I just had a slicker presentation, if I just had better words, that I would win the day. We have learned that it's really not so much about that. It's really about authenticity and sincerity. If you go and you talk to investors, I think most of them will say that the key traits they look for are kind of how talented and committed the individuals are. And so if you can speak with passion, speak with authenticity, convey that commitment, you're going to do better. You know, we had a competition once where it was in a much bigger room than this, and one of the guys got up and his clicker broke, right? And he had like 20 slides in 5 minutes. So he set the clicker down and he just spoke honestly about exactly what he was trying to accomplish. And he ended up being one of our winners. So if you can embrace that notion, I think you'll do better.
Jason Morgan and Common Pool, we can't thank you enough for your help and your expertise and your leadership on this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So now, without further delay, let's get to the presentation. So just so everybody knows the process, teams have been told this, I don't know, you guys, 25 times? They have 5 minutes, 5 minutes to make their best pitch. And then there will be a question, maybe 2, depending from the judging panel. We're going to ask them a question or 2. And as I mentioned, the order was chosen randomly today at lunch. We just drew numbers, and that's how it did. So the very first team, Owlstone Medical, Mike Murphy. You're going to present yourself, Mike. And Mark is too? All right. And Mark Vandershee.
Great.
Come on up, guys. Guys from Owlstone.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. First off, I must say this is truly amazing. Like today, like interacting with all the other contestants has been really, really amazing and inspiring in itself. I'm Mark. I'm the head of clinical for Owlstone, and I'm going to tell you something about the bid of Owlstone Medical for the IPF Catalyst Challenge. So Owlstone Medical is developing a breathalyzer for disease. It's our approach to helping realize our vision of saving 100,000 lives. We aim to use this breathalyzer and collaborate with the IPF Catalyst Challenge to develop a test for the early detection of IPF. And as we've heard before today, early detection really matters in IPF. Early detection equals early treatment equals an improved outcome for patients with IPF. To date, patients with IPF suffer from the disease process that drive fibrosis in their airways for years up till the point that they're diagnosed. This is really something that must change because it's associated with an increased risk of these patients dying. Alstom Medical's technology is specifically geared towards measuring those disease processes that occur early in IPF, simply by analyzing your breath. And you may not have realized this, but every time that you exhale, your breath contains a wealth of information. There are up to 1,000 different compounds on your breath. These provide us with insight into the functioning of your body, both in health and in disease. It's through analysis of these types of compounds that we're able to gain detailed insight into the processes that underpin IPF, such as remodeling in the airway and airway inflammation. Alstom has spent the past 2 years developing the breath biopsy platform. That platform allows us to, in a robust way, analyze the breath of an individual for biomarkers. It's currently deployed in over 90 sites across the globe. We aim to use this technology to build a breathalyzer for IPF. And let me show you in a bit more detail what that looks like. So this is the receiver breath collector. It allows you to collect and store your breath onto a cartridge. This device has been developed in close collaboration with patients to assure it's usable in clinical practice. We're currently also engaged in developing this version, which will be suitable for use in secondary primary care and potentially even for at-home use. Once the breath has been collected onto a cartridge like this, it's shipped to our breath biopsy lab. It's analyzed for its biomarkers. We've used this process in over 2,000 patients to build the world's largest breath database. And I want to touch upon this database in a bit more detail because it's important to this study. So 1,600 patients within the database actually originate from the LUCID early detection of lung cancer trial. So that is important because these patients are also at increased risk of having IPF. That means careful analysis of this database could reveal the candidate biomarkers for an early detection test for IPF. We aim to utilize this grant to work closely with experts in the field of IPF to analyze the 1,600 CT scans we have of these patients. That will help reveal the earliest signs of IPF. By correlating that with our established database of breath biomarkers, we're able to create a breath biopsy test for IPF. And this is actually really a unique time to be engaging in a project like this. We have established the technology. Historic investment has made it possible to recruit these 1,600 patients. And future investment Alstom Medical is planning to make, such as a US-based CLIA lab, will position us well to, once validated, launch a breath test for IPF as an LDT. I want to stress that we really see this project as a stepping stone. So the breath biomarkers for IPF correlate strongly with the disease activity. That means that ultimately such a breath test could also be used to monitor the disease. We hope that would empower both patients and clinicians to move towards a different approach of handling their disease. An approach where a patient with IPF could be treated with the right drug at the right time. In summary, we're really excited about the prospect of working with the IPF Catalyst because it will provide us with the resources and the expertise that we need to ultimately turn this into an early detection test for IPF. Thank you for your attention.
I broke this already. So
Wasn't
Mark,
me?
it wasn't you, it was me. So Mark, you know, we love this product because it's more of a platform that can be used. And right now you're using it across a range of pulmonary diseases, right?
Yeah.
So explain what you think the path is. Can you find a VOC, a volatile organic compound biomarker for IPF? Do you know if it exists? Can you find it? What's the path to get there?
Yeah. So I think there are actually two aspects to answering that question. One being the fact that pilot studies to date have shown that there's a difference between patients with IPF and control patients. And the other aspect is that we have built evidence through studying these other pulmonary diseases as well, that the fundamental processes that underpin IPF, such as remodeling and airway inflammation, that they're linked to specific volatiles that we can detect in breath. And this study is actually, it's a pretty unique opportunity because we've collected these samples, and what we actually do is we sort of profile the entire breath to detect all the biomarkers in there, not just related to lung cancer, but related to all the processes that occur in the body. So that allows us to focus on different aspects of the study, as long as we have these diagnostic labels, and that's really the purpose of this.
And from the quality of life perspective, the theory is you find it sooner. You can hopefully get them treated sooner, you can manage it. Tell us why this affects the patient's quality of life.
Yeah, so I guess the amazing thing, like being a physician myself, what I always find amazing about the body is that there's so much residual capacity. The body's actually so strong. Before patients with IPF start suffering from their symptoms, they've lost so much of their lung capacity already. So if you're able to detect the disease process very early on, you can intervene when the disease is actually already deteriorating someone's lung capacity, and hopefully slow that down and really extend the period that someone still has a good quality of life, ultimately hopefully even preventing that situation where they become oxygen dependent.
Great, thank you very much.
Right.
I want to also let you know that when these presentations are done and we open the voting for you, so remember, take notes, like look at these, make yourself notes so you know who you're going to vote for. We're going to have a couple special guests come up here. Dr. Ivan Rosas from, oh, speaking of, it's like Norm from Cheers. I said his name and he walked in. There he is, from Brigham and Women's University. And also Bill Vick. For anyone involved in the IPF community, you have to know the name Bill Vick. He is one of the most passionate patients who has this disease, and he has fought hard and continues to want to bring awareness to this disease. So the two of them are going to talk about what they're hearing right now in these presentations, and they're going to discuss what it would mean to a patient and a clinician as we go back and tally up the votes and come back and bring you the results. So stay tuned for that as well. Our next presenter is... here we go. Dolby Vivazol, Leslie Hill, and Willie McGee from all over, from Europe, from Scotland. They came in and they flew in, and here they are. So, Leslie, to you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for having us here today. My name's Leslie Hill, and I'm here representing Dolby Vivazol. We've put together a team to bring a collaborative approach to dealing with some of the problems that patients with IPF experience. The team is represented by people from the clinical team at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, University Hospital Glasgow. Myself, I come from Dumfries, and it's actually a picture there of Robert Burns, and it is his birthday tomorrow, so we're celebrating that. The team from National Services Scotland from Glasgow, and we've also got one of our technology partners, Jens from Lübeck in Germany, and we do think that Jens wins the prize for the prettiest picture. So how are we working together? And really what we're looking at is providing a collaborative approach to improving the life of patients with IPF who are receiving oxygen therapy. And we're doing that in a four-pronged attack using NHS Scotland. And within Scotland, we have a very unique approach to the provision of home oxygen therapy. We have a national service so that all of the patients in Scotland receive a universal treatment for oxygen, and that is delivered by a single supplier, ourselves, Dolby Vivazol. We work with many, many different organisations in the provision of that service, including DHAS, ensuring that at all times we have a patient-centred approach to the patients receiving oxygen therapy. But what brings us here today? We deal with over 6,500 patients receiving oxygen in Scotland, and what we've seen over recent years is that the number of IPF patients are growing. And currently the technology that exists does not meet the needs of those IPF patients. The technology that exists has been designed for the vast majority of patients on oxygen therapy that have COPD. So really what we're looking at is a solution for IPF patients. So I'm now going to so why are IPF patients different? You know, oxygen's oxygen. But not really, because what we know is that IPF patients require moderate amounts of oxygen perhaps when they're at rest, but with higher requirements of oxygen when they're mobilizing. they tend to, as a group of patients, be younger, fitter, and it has a very sudden onset and an aggressive progression, whereas a COPD patient is a gradual, insidious disease. So that gives us very different requirements for oxygen. So I'm now going to hand you over to Willie, and he's going to just talk a bit more about our journey here today and what we intend to do about it.
Thanks, I'm Willie McGee. I'm Project Manager for the Home Oxygen Service in Scotland. If I could briefly tell you a classic example of an IPF patient, 60-year-old male patient, very active, lives in a rural location. His family live 2.5 hours away. His oxygen requirements are 4 litres per minute at rest and 8 litres per minute on exertion. His current LOX flask will only give him 2 hours. So the question is, how can he see his grandchildren? And I think you know the answer. The answer is with some difficulty. Currently, no LOX flask can give the combination of pulsed and continuous flow rates that IPF patients require. We intend to develop a new flask with DHAS that combines both moderate pulse rates and also the high continuous flow rates that's required when mobilising. This will give increased capacity, longer duration, and we intend to use pulse flow rates of between 4 and 10 and continuous flow rates up to 15 litres per minute. We have modelled the time that would be available from a LOX flask, and you can see that we can estimate that we could get up to 6 hours and 30 minutes from a single flask. 2 hours is perhaps enough to go for a cup of coffee, but if we can get this to 6 hours, then that's enough time to go to the cinema or go out for a meal, and that will truly be transformational. How will we deliver this? Well, we'll design and manufacture a new LOX flask in partnership with DHAS. The flask will be evaluated by our clinical team at the Queen Elizabeth using a standard variety of techniques. What difference will this make for our patients? It will give them freedom to spend time away from their base unit. It will increase their mobility, increase their quality of life, and give them the confidence and trust that they need to ensure that they're not going to run out of their oxygen whilst away from home. And it may well also save some money due to reduction in liquid oxygen deliveries. So we think the strength in our bids lies in our multi-partnership approach. We have the expertise from DHAS, governance through NHS Scotland, implementation through Dolby Vivisol, and clinical testing through Greater Glasgow and Clyde. As part of our day job, we see IPF patients on a daily basis, and it pains me to see them when they realise that they're going to be stuck in their home and that their activity is going to be severely limited. So with your help, we can give them a degree of freedom. Thank you.
So I think a couple questions that we have. So you look at this in the UK, and I think there's been some barriers and limitations for liquid oxygen here in the US. How do you propose to get over that and bring it to a broader audience outside of Scotland?
Yeah, no, I think that by working, if I can maybe invite Jens from DHAS up here, that yes, we've looked at the specific problem as it relates to patients that we see on a day-to-day basis. We can certainly do that across Europe, but Jens, with the development with DHAS, would be able to develop that worldwide.
Well, currently we have a product that has already a 510K release, so that can be easily adapted, so there's no big barrier from the regulations. So if we can do something specific on IPF patients, it can be also rolled out in the US without any problems and any doubts.
Any other questions from the judging panel? I'm gonna repeat this after you say it, Bill Vick. Hold on, for everybody at home. Yeah. Great question. So Bill said he's quivering with excitement, and I'm going to tell you a story. I noticed that Dr. Cosgrove and Scott Stasek from the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation are here, and Bill Schmidt would be here, the CEO, but he's out of the country right now. But I'm going to tell a story about liquid oxygen problems and oxygen problems here in the U.S. But Bill's question was, how are they going to distribute it? How can they distribute it, and how can he refill his oxygen canister?
I think that the responsibility lies with the gas companies. And certainly Dolby Vivisol, our parent company, is Sol, which is one of the large manufacturers of liquid oxygen. So I think that perhaps we don't currently operate in the US, so maybe there's opportunities there. But I think you're absolutely right. We have to look at the distribution from the gas companies, and that's a responsibility for them.
Thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank you.
I'll tell you 2 quick stories about the oxygen problem, and this is mind-boggling to me, but one that we found out as we've been traveling around, which is when you get an ICD-9 or 10 code, which is written on your records, the fact that you have IPF, there's no corresponding durable medical equipment code for IPF. So what do? They give IPF patients the amount of oxygen that's needed if you have emphysema. What happens? You run out, and they can't get more. It's unconscionable that the ecosystem is set up this way, and that's something that we're also tackling. And the PFF story really quickly was Bill Schmidt was with a group of people lobbying CMS to talk about reimbursement for oxygen, and someone from central management in our government said, I don't get it. Why would we need to reimburse portable oxygen concentrators? Why do they need oxygen outside the home? Right. Enough said. All right, our next presenter is from the Mayo Clinic Rochester, Dr. Joseph Jacob and team, but here he is by himself without the team. Like Diana Ross without the pips.
Thank you very much. My name's Joseph Jacob. I'm a radiologist, and I'm presenting a proposal on behalf of the Mayo Clinic Rochester, Minnesota, University College London, and Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. Our proposal has 4 main aspects to it. We want to use computer tools to analyze CT images in patients to detect early lung fibrosis. Once we've detected early lung fibrosis, we want to identify those patterns on a CT that indicate that a patient's going to progress rapidly, and thereby identify those patients that need aggressive monitoring, treatment, and management. Lastly, analyzing CTs with a computer generates a huge amount of complicated information. We want to display this in a way that a patient, their family, and their relatives can all understand. Now, this is a CT scan in a healthy patient. And unfortunately, far too many patients with IPF are diagnosed when their scan looks like this. Large areas of damage in the lungs indicating advanced, severe disease. We want to use computer tools to identify disease at a much earlier stage, where the only abnormalities may be subtle dilatations of the airways in the periphery of the lungs. Now, importantly, these changes are visible on a CT scan before a patient's breathing tests become abnormal. So in effect, we're trying to identify pre-symptomatic disease. A second fact is that in patients now, CT radiation doses are so low that CT scans are becoming more and more frequent. So now in the USA, lung cancer screening studies are scanning tens of thousands of patients with CTs, and we're looking very carefully to identify lung cancer in these patients. But all these patients are at risk of lung fibrosis, and there is no standardized way to identify fibrosis on these patient CTs. And this is where computers come in so useful, because today, computers can identify things that humans can't see visually. Now, our proposal has 2 main aims. To create our computer tool, we need a huge amount of data. And to that end, we're going to curate 2 huge CT databases. We're going to identify patients who've had fibrosis but had multiple CT scans. We're going to look at the very first CT scan in that patient and see if we can identify patterns that A, indicate that patient's going to get fibrosis, and B, that patient's going to progress very fast. We have 4,000 scans we can look at already at the Mayo Clinic, and we want to get funding to expand this to look at 10 years worth of Mayo Clinic CTs. And in addition, look at a huge number of CTs from Scotland. We believe there'll be 19,000 patients with multiple CTs who've developed fibrosis over time. And what we hope is at the end of this, we'll have these 2 CT databases available for use for investigators who are interested in this field. The second part of our proposal is creation of the tool itself. And we have a lot of experience with this already. Our team at the Mayo Clinic have created one of the leading tools identifying fibrosis in established fibrotic patients. The computer tool called Caliper looks at tiny 3-dimensional pixels in the lungs over 500 sections of a CT scan and determines whether each pixel is normal, and if it's abnormal, what kind of abnormality it shows. And this has been shown to better predict a patient's disease severity than lung breathing tests or looking at a CT scan visually. But there's more than that. The tool is also able to display the complicated information it produces in a very simple to understand method, and this is called the glyph. The outer white ring is what a patient's lung volume should be. The colored glyph is what the patient's lung volume actually is. So the fact that it's smaller than the white circle means that the patient's lost lung volume because of fibrosis. Each of the pie segments represents a region of the lung, and the different colors indicate which bits of the lung are abnormal and which are normal. And what this means is that for a patient, they can see from diagnosis, over the progression of disease, how their lungs are going from green, normal, to abnormal, and how their lungs are shrinking over time. And we believe this is really important information for patients and their families to understand how their disease is progressing over time. We want to use and do similar things in early lung fibrosis and display the information in a similar, easy to understand way. And we want to use a large computer laboratory at University College London to use machine learning to analyze these thousands of CTs to identify early lung fibrosis. We believe our study will have huge impact to identify early lung fibrosis in the tens of thousands of patients undergoing lung cancer screening, in patients with collagen vascular disease, where lung disease is the main killer, but no one knows how to identify early lung fibrosis, in relatives of patients with familial fibrosis, and in patients living in very polluted cities around the world where lung damage is happening and we don't know how to evaluate it. We think the time is right to use CT tools in this way. We hope the IPF challenge will enable us in this endeavor. Thank you very much.
Leave it to the marketing girl to ask about a really technology question with artificial intelligence, but that's essentially deep learning. Artificial intelligence is too broad of a term, but deep learning tools to be able to identify fibrosis sooner. You're going to teach the machines to do this, right?
Yes.
So in other words, you'll put these scans in, the machine will eventually learn, be able to predict it, or say to someone who's going through a routine lung cancer screening, you might want to go get secondarily screened for IPF. Is that the goal?
Absolutely, absolutely, that's our goal. And what we're finding with patients with established disease already is that we have been looking for patterns based on a historic bunch of CT pictures. So we've had CT scans for 20 years, and we've been using very low-level CT imaging to detect important patterns. But CT scans have evolved, and we can see much more with computers than we could before. So now we're identifying the patterns that are important, the ones we never knew were important. The computer is teaching us, and in addition, we're then able to train the computer. So it's a lovely conversation between the two.
And how that affects the patient's quality of life is that it finds it earlier, is the hope.
Absolutely. It finds it earlier so that you can identify in a patient that's high risk, if they get an infection, you treat it more aggressively, you monitor them more closely, and our hope eventually is that there'll be treatments that can be used at a very early stage of disease when they have a lot of normal lung, and that can prolong their life.
And how much of this is about that, finding treatments on the front end, being able to use this to see if treatments are working?
I think both are absolutely important. Right now, the treatments for IPF have a lot of side effects, and they're very expensive. And we hope in 2 years' time there'll be lots more treatments. It may be that we can use these computer tools to identify that this patient isn't responding to this drug, so they should be changed to another drug, and therefore get the optimum treatment for that particular patient, so personalize their management.
Sorry, one more question from the panel. Where's the mic? With the money from this award, is the data set sufficient?
So we would argue that at the moment it will be for the traction bronchiectasis measure that we want to identify, because we're hoping around 10,000 scans or patients from the Mayo Clinic and 19,000 from Edinburgh. This is enough for a deep learning system, but of course we need to be sure that this is expandable to other CT reconstruction algorithms, different scanners. So the more data, the better in all these situations, but we think we have sufficient amount.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Jacob.
Thank you very much.
All right, next one up, team number 4, the Cambridge Respiratory Innovations Limited, Jeremy Walsh and Dr. Manhunthan Thiali. Did I do it? Did I get it?
You're close, you're close.
Darn it. Guys, thank you very much. Here you go.
Oops. Great. Thank you very much for having us. We are going to give you the concept of a personal respiratory monitor that predicts IPF exacerbations. So my name is Mahunthan. I'm a pulmonologist. I'm the director of the interstitial lung unit in Cambridge in the United Kingdom. And this is where I work, the Royal Papworth Hospital. It's somewhere I'm very proud of. This year is our 100-year anniversary. We are the largest heart and lung hospital in Europe. We are the country's main heart and lung transplant centre, and within our team we have around 1,500 patients looked after by a mix of doctors and nurses. We're situated here in the centre of Cambridge, and we have great partners. We have the Institute of Cancer Research, the University Medical School, and that big donut building behind the hospital is the new world headquarters of the pharma giant AstraZeneca. I'm telling you this because we have great partners in order to do clinical trials like the one that I want to talk about. And this is the problem with IPF, the unpredictability. When I see you as a patient in my clinic, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know when you're going to get worse. I don't know when you're going to go on oxygen, and I don't know when you're going to have an exacerbation. And we know from people like Dr. Ragu in Seattle and colleagues around the world that if you have an exacerbation where the IPF suddenly gets worse, then there's an 80% in-hospital mortality. And if you come out, you're much worse than when you went in. This is one patient. She's a real patient. Her name is Anne. And when I saw her, we put her on the drug pirfenidone, one of the antifibrotics. And you can see that her lung function went down, and stabilized on the drug. But a year on the drug, something changed. And over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, we kept seeing her in clinic, but I didn't know what had changed. Her CTs, her bloods, everything was normal, but she didn't quite seem right. And then she had a sudden exacerbation of her IPF. She came in, and unfortunately, after a few weeks, she passed away and died. And her CT scan, which had been normal, showed a big exacerbation. And as doctors, we don't think about our successes. We had a young guy, one of my favourite patients, who had a lung transplant before Christmas and is doing really well. I won't ever think about him again. I'll always think about people like Anne. And you'll always wonder, did I mess up somewhere? Did I have the data to predict the exacerbation? And if I had, could I have treated her earlier, changed her disease outcome, and perhaps bought her some more time? I'm going to hand over to Jeremy, who's the CEO of Krill, the company in Cambridge we're working with.
Thank you. So, we've been on a journey this last 4 years, and we started off by identifying an underused biomarker, tidal breathing CO2 waveform shape analysis. We found out that it was underused because people couldn't measure it correctly. So that meant that we had to create a new sensor, which we did in 2014. This is an epitaxially grown LED sensor. It's inexpensive to make, and it's far more accurate than anyone else's sensor for CO2. We've since then gone on to make our first personal respiratory monitor, a data collector, the M-Tidal C. We've used this now in substantial clinical trials. And at the moment, we're building a market-ready N-Tidal B. We have a lot of clinical work going on at the moment in the UK in various respiratory conditions: asthma, COPD, cystic fibrosis, motor neurone disease, I think you call it ALS here, pneumonia. So the technology is proven. And what we can see with this is a person with COPD. We can see the build-up to an exacerbation. These are readings taken morning and evening, and we can see that here there's at least 48 hours notice that a person is going into a COPD exacerbation. With asthma, we can see a lot more on that. We see a build-up over a long period. And what we have here is this long period of poor medicines adherence where the patient is building up. The patient thought they were perfectly well. This goes on, and we see that this patient, in fact, has an asthma attack on the 15th of September. I won't run it through to there, but suddenly that person is ill. We could have told them that. So our project is to research IPF. We need to have 20,000 records, which is 60 patients using our technology for a period of 6 months. We'll put together a complete health infrastructure behind it. And what we have is we have a really high-quality technical and clinical team. We have great devices. And we have tremendous machine learning support from Cambridge University and also from Microsoft. Thank you.
From the panel. So we have a couple questions. First of all, what would the doctor do differently if they saw that?
So we would treat them earlier because we know from great microbiome data when you lavage the lungs that most of these exacerbations are infections. We give them steroids, may or may not work, but we would bring that lady into hospital, give her intravenous antibiotics from day 0 and see if we could predict and stop this happening.
How would the patient experience this? Do you see this as this is something that they have at home, this is something when they're not feeling well, they would go in? Because in theory, it would work better if they had the ability to do this at home and be able to test it all the time.
It will be daily testing at home. It's very simple because it's normal tidal breathing. It's what we're doing at the moment. So there's no strain, 75 seconds in the morning and in the evening, and it's done. We collect our readings from that, come over the, well, it's got a phone chip in it, so it sends them to us, and they get a local alert.
Any other questions from the panel? All right, thank you guys very much. Thank you. So for those of you who don't know, an exacerbation with a lot of these patients, once they have one, they don't recover usually back to where they were at that point. They fall down and they don't get back. And so as they have them, it's fatal for a lot of these patients, which is usually what precipitates a trip to the hospital. So it's important to know if those are coming. Our next presenter came all the way from Dublin, Eamon Costello, and patient Empower. So please welcome him.
What if I told you the most underutilized resource in healthcare sitting right here in this room? A resource that, if harnessed, could improve outcomes in IPF, could accelerate research, and enhance the quality of life of patients. Should we not make full use of that resource? The resource is the patient. Empowering them could preserve precious lung function by personalizing exercise plans, tailoring medication information and reminders, and monitoring vital signs to identify issues early. Organizing and personalizing everything related to their health. This is Patient Empower's mission, and we strive to empower PF warriors to live better with IPF. We started our IPF journey 2 years ago with this support group in Ireland. Their warmth and their passion and their energy, and from all PF warriors, has been really, truly amazing. We want to understand and we strive to understand their needs, but also the needs of caregivers and health professionals. And we learn from them at home, at support groups, and connecting with them on social media. And it's on social media we connected with and heard about Tammy. She's a caregiver and a passionate advocate for IPF. Social media is an amazing tool where a caregiver like Tammy can seek guidance from a leading pulmonologist like Naftali. Tammy lives in Georgia, and this is her dad, Frank, who has IPF. Frank lives in Pennsylvania. IPF doesn't just affect patients, it has a huge impact on caregivers and family members. Frank uses our IPF Care Kit. It's a mobile app with connected devices to monitor lung and oxygen vital signs. It educates and empowers him to be a full participant at the center of his care. So he's no longer a spectator being controlled by IPF. He's living with it. He's managing it. But with the help of the Catalyst, we think we can do so much more for Frank and for Tammy. When there's severe weather, we'll get in touch with him to let him know how he should be better managing his breathing. And if there's pollution or wildfires, we'll alert him about the air quality, advising him to be doing his pulmonary exercises indoors. Being part of a community is so important to empower people. Harnessing the goodwill of the IPF community, we'll connect Frank to support groups and to mentors near him in Pennsylvania. And even though Tammy lives 700 miles away, she'll be able to see how he's doing real time with her Patient Empower Carer app. And her dad will be able to have one-to-one confidential discussions with mentors on anything that's concerning him. Frank produces a very large volume of data, but our validated algorithms will recognize issues early, alerting him to act now with this knowledge and not wait months until his next appointment. Frank's data doesn't just help himself. It's also collected in our digital biobank, along with data donated by all of the PF warriors. It's an amazing resource for IPF research. Adding to our current phenotype data, we're adding geomedicine, which is related to pollution, weather, and notifiable disease where you live. We're adding to this crowdsourced genotype data. Combining these rich data sets will unlock new insights into IPF and will map human health for IPF. And we believe through collaboration with others, this will be the start of personalized medicine in IPF. To do this, we need a large data set, a global data set. Starting with the PF warriors in Texas, we've been building relationships with patients and charities around the world. And this month, I'm proud to announce that we've agreed in principle a strategic partnership with the British Lung Foundation to help fight IPF. Our team will deliver this plan with the urgency the PF warriors deserve. And working with everyone here, we will be the catalyst to empower patients, to improve outcomes, and to accelerate research. A well-known proverb tells us, you can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. With the IPF Catalyst, let's help PF warriors adjust the sails in their daily lives and one day tame the wind and defeat IPF. Thank you.
Eamon, how many patients are currently using the platform right now?
So we've about 200 active users. So I think only a few months back, we didn't really have any US users, and now over 50% are.
And what kind of data? You mentioned you have data points from that. How much data do you have from these users?
There's about 3 million data points already from those IPF users. So it ranges from different data points we're collecting on spirometry, so the main one being forced vital capacity. But it ranges through. The unique thing about our data set is it's objective data like that, but it's also the quality of life data. So how breathless am I? How do I feel? So it's all of those types of data are really important as well. And added to that, it's all the activity data, the location data, the pollution data.
And you mentioned that you work with patient groups and you've talked to patient groups. What have you found would be the biggest barrier for distribution or for patients to use this? What is your biggest concern from a distribution and then also from a user perspective?
I suppose for distribution, it's probably just getting the hardware out, but that's kind of easily solved. I think one of the barriers is sometimes there's a fear of technology, but I think that's getting easier now as people are starting to spread their stories on social media. So more people are approaching us that want to get started. The other thing, which is why we want to bring in the caregiver app, I think some people that were very fearful of it have been able to get started through a caregiver, or, son or a daughter as well.
Anybody on the panel? We good? Eamon, thank you very much. Patient Empower. Okay, we're up to number 6. Advanced Interactive Response Systems, AIRS, is up next. Valerie Obenchain and her team bringing props. It's good. Valerie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. My name is Valerie Obenchain, and my background is in business, and I've also worked for over 20 years as a registered respiratory therapist. Please raise your hand if you or somebody you know has ever had to wear supplemental oxygen. Did you know there are 4.2 million oxygen users right here in the United States? Oxygen therapy is a critical part of care in IPF patients, and it has issues. I've seen firsthand how bad these issues were when an oxygen patient had died because their oxygen tank ran out. I looked for solutions for these problems, and sadly there were none. So I began prototyping, and I started AIRS. Oxygen users are continually concerned with their oxygen supply. They take their oxygen out of their nose constantly, checking to make sure it works correctly. These are a result of issues such as mechanical failure, depleted oxygen supply, disconnection, and power outages. It only takes a matter of minutes without the proper amount of oxygen before a patient's life is severely at risk. Because of this, patients are constantly concerned and monitoring their oxygen. Air systems address all of these issues, ensuring that the proper amount of oxygen is being delivered to those patients. AIRS remotely monitors the oxygen patient and their oxygen supply. Our products were designed to track and trend data. Our AIRS oxygen flow monitor monitors the pressure, the flow, and the tank status. And it also monitors the patient's pulse oximetry. This information is displayed on our devices and also sent to our app to remotely monitor the patients. We have audible, visual, and remote alarms. The oxygen flow monitor can be used by itself as a standalone product with any oxygen source because it's downstream, or it can be used in combination with the Regulator Plus and changeover system. The Regulator Plus and the changeover system is designed to display the time till empty, so you have advanced notification of when your oxygen tank needs to be changed. And with the changeover system, we can automatically change to a backup supply with no manual intervention required. That means we could fix the problem for you. All products are portable and ensure the IPF patient is receiving the correct amount of oxygen by monitoring the system and the patient. Data and alerts are transmitted to a mobile platform with our app. Here are examples of data, and it can be based on a single patient like this or multiple patients. Oxygen flow, stats, heart rate, and even depleted oxygen tanks are all displayed and sent to the patient, oxygen supplier, and caregiver. So if there's an alarm or an issue, it sends a text that's automated generated through the app to those listed to receive those. All products offer complete system monitoring in real time. Our systems were based on customer discovery and feedback from oxygen users, caregivers, physicians, family members, and even the oxygen supplier. What makes us different is that we monitor the oxygen supply systems with our digital health products, but we also monitor the oxygen patients. We can notify the caregiver and the oxygen supplier if their oxygen supply is low, allowing us to prioritize the oxygen deliveries and ensure the patient receives the needed oxygen. No one else does this. These features are protected by a utility patent which was issued here in the United States. We have 2 issued patents and a patent pending and have filed in other countries. AIRS is a small woman-owned business, and I've personally invested $250,000 and cashed out my retirement fund to help AIRS. Most of our team are also investors. AIRS is the spec developer, and we use contract manufacturing, regulatory professionals, and distributors to get our products to the end market. Here's our advisory team. We've raised a round of funding of $540,000 and are close, but we need this prize money. This $333,000 would make a huge impact for AIRS. This will give us the financial backing that we need to bring our oxygen flow monitor to market. We've already had an FDA pre-submission meeting and have invested over $800,000 towards this project. And with this prize money, we could get across the finish line. Here are our 5-year projections, and we have huge global market potential. And we know there's 8 other great companies out here tonight, but our systems will save lives, money, and improve the quality care for oxygen patients. We could be a new standard for patient care. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
A couple questions. So I think, you know, for those of us who have been in the space and for those who you live it, patients who live this, I think we need to give a little context. It's mind-boggling to me that oxygen tanks don't have alarms when they run out. How is that possible? Seriously.
In today's age, I don't understand it. That's why when we seen the issues and seen how great, where patients are dying over this, living in constant fear, their oxygen running out, I couldn't just sit back and, you know, turn a blind eye to it. I knew that there were solutions out there. I knew it wasn't rocket science. If nobody else was going to step up, I sure was.
And is the reason people didn't step up is oxygen's a commodity game, reimbursement, but there was no one that created it. What we're interested in is, you said any oxygen source.
Yes,
So this would work on any oxygen source, no matter who the distributor is.
exactly. It's downstream, this oxygen flow monitor here, so it's downstream for the oxygen supply. So any oxygen supply, liquid, bulk, the home concentrators, it would all attach to it, even the portable concentrators as well. Bolts, continuous flow.
Kenton has a question, and he has a microphone, thankfully.
So what discussions have you had with potential partners?
Well, a lot of people, when they hear FDA, they get scared. We're getting more interest because we've actually had that pre-submission meeting with the FDA. We know our classification. We know what testing is needed to be done. We've already met with them, so we have a clear understanding. But until we clear the FDA process, a lot of companies consider us a little too early for them. That's why we need this prize money, because that will get us through the FDA testing and across that finish line so we can have the approval that we need so we can bring this product to market.
Jason, anybody else? Anybody? Valerie, thank you very much, and thank you for your passion for these patients. You know, I've said this, it's unconscionable to me, and those of us who have, you know, an Alexa that does everything for us, and we can remotely start our cars, that the patients who suffer from needing oxygen, whether they be IPF or COPD, the fact that they have to get up, walk to the other room, turn it up, that they don't know whether the oxygen tank is running out, they don't know whether the oxygen's actually flowing, that's unconscionable in the day and age that we live in. So it's great to see a couple of oxygen solutions here tonight. Our seventh presenter, lucky number 7, University of Chicago Interstitial Lung Disease Team, Dr. Mary Struck and Dr. Jonathan Chung.
Imagine it's difficult to breathe. You cough uncontrollably. You've been diagnosed with IPF, a disease no one seems to have heard of. Imagine somebody's recommended, maybe a medical care provider, that you get your affairs in order. In your shock, you turn to the internet and you find information that's inaccurate, distressing, and difficult to understand.
Our dream is to create a series of online educational modules for IPF patients, their caregivers, and for physicians. Our team is committed to improving the lives of IPF patients through I was supposed to play audio. Well, what I will say is that we
Here yesterday.
Well, bottom line, this is actually just trying to say that we are a committed team. We're a committed team, and we're passionate about IPF. We take care of these patients every day, and we really, really, really want to create these online educational modules. That's what the video would have said, right?
And it also was introducing our multidisciplinary team, which consists of pulmonologists who care daily for patients, chest radiologists, and basic scientists.
Excellent. So let's talk about our approach, though. So if we got this award, we would be able to create these online educational modules. They would consist of short videos with printable materials. The videos would consist of short summaries of highlights or clinical pearls of the topic at hand. And then we'd follow that up with more comprehensive video content, which would also include engaging diagrams as well as graphics. So after we create these modules, we would actually form IPF focus groups where IPF experts and patients would go over the content. Then obviously we would incorporate that feedback. Modules would also be regularly updated based on advances in the field.
What if all patients with IPF had access to accurate information about what the disease is, about what might contribute to disease worsening, and how to fight against it? Imagine that care providers everywhere were trained to recognize IPF early and to make accurate and precise diagnoses. When I'm in clinic with an IPF patient, there is never enough time. There are so many questions, and the information we provide is often overwhelming. And for patients who don't have the opportunity to be seen at a pulmonary fibrosis center of excellence, their questions may really never get answered. So what if we partnered and we made high-quality, factual, engaging, online videos with complementary written material so that patients with IPF could have their hunger for information satisfied, and medical providers could be updated and educated on best practices. In the end, that would empower the patient and improve care for IPF.
So why us? We are a team who believe in optimal diagnosis and management of patients with IPF. We meet regularly to discuss active clinical cases and to talk about our research. And we get things done. Our scholarship really attests to our tenacity and leadership in the field of IPF. But I don't think that tells you the complete story. One of my mentors told me a long time ago, still resonates with me today, that genuine passion always trumps expertise or experience. What makes our team special is that we are truly passionate about IPF. You know the 5 minutes before you fall asleep, when you kind of think about what's going on during the day? You know what we think about?
We think about the patient with IPF. Did we help explain their diagnosis? How are they coping with symptoms? Did we give them the information they need about treatment, lung transplant, and palliative care?
We're not doing this for monetary gain.
Modules will be free.
And we're not doing this for notoriety.
There are few rewards for educational pursuits.
We're doing this to improve the lives of patients with IPF. And the time to do it is now. Thank you.
Jonathan, that's one of those moments where, like Jason said, I mean, when it goes away, just show your passion. You guys both did that, and you vamped that very well. Bill Vick has a question. Hand him the microphone there, Ken. 1 second.
And I don't mean to embarrass our distinguished guest, but as a question, would you provide this information to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation and the American Lung Association gratis, free, for their use as they see fit?
Absolutely. In fact, we're hoping to partner with every one of those organizations: CHEST, ATS, Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, American Lung Foundation, every foundation we can get who would be interested. Hopefully, they would give us advertising maybe in their journals and certainly at their meetings. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We're all on the same team,
Yeah.
right? And there's synergies in teamwork.
Right. This is really to make patients' lives better. And I think it would do so immediately. There's so many pieces of advice we could give patients that would really change and have an impact tomorrow.
How often do you hear it from the patients? How often do they say, Dr. Streck, where's the information? How often do they just?
Every single day. I go into clinic kind of prepared for battle, if you will, because I know there is no way I can give them the care that I could provide. And I think with these modules, which we envision as a conversational style, we have an amazing nurse specialist. She's been taking care of IPF patients with us for 10 years. She knows what the questions are. And together, I think that we could create engaging, factual modules, taking the patient from when they first get their diagnosis to when they come to that first really difficult clinic visit. And then how about the lung function we get every time? They're always asking, which ones do you care about? We can do that in a module. Look at chest radiology, explain what's honeycombing, what's UIP, all those terms we use. And then also we mentioned the risk factors for progression. I don't think we talk about that enough. There are exposures that patients continue to experience on a daily basis that are not being recognized.
So how, with this prize, how would you keep it updated, right? Because the information's going to change, the patients are going to change, there could be new things on the horizon. What would be the plan to keep it going?
So these would have to be regularly reviewed to make sure that they're up to speed. The portion of the video which would actually be very, very intently focusing on would be the first summary portion where we talk about the highlights and or the clinical pearls. And so those are the ones that would be, I think, most malleable for change. The conversational style video, that's more for the basics for the.
It'd be like a donut. They'd be
exactly
so interstitials where you could put those in and.
Exactly.
Okay. Any questions? Any other questions? Great. You guys, thank you very much, and great job tap dancing there. Our eighth, we're almost done with our eighth presenter, Sam Glassenberg and Genevieve Paquette from Level X. Please welcome them.
All right. Plug in this live demo. Okay, we are Level X, and we create video games to educate doctors at scale.
So imagine a patient that has a persistent cough that hasn't gone away for weeks. They're concerned and they end up seeing their primary care physician. But they might end up getting stuck in a referral loop, seeing many different providers over a course of many months. And only half are probably even considering that it's IPF. With 4 million physicians worldwide seeing patients that are presenting with symptoms like that cough, and only a handful of IPF specialists out there, our charge at Level X is to make sure that every doctor along that journey is an IPF expert. So how do you rapidly change the diagnostic and treatment behavior of physicians at scale?
So this should be a familiar example from another public health crisis. So you may be aware that the US government over the last decade has spent over $1 billion to try to get overweight American kids to get off the couch and go outside. And as it turns out, in a single week, one video game got 20 million Americans out of their house and walking 4 miles. Almost half of them were over the age of 35. And so this is the power of video games to change behavior at scale. Now, the design of video games is based on a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and neuroscience, achieving this perfect balance of reward, frustration, challenge, and skill to maximize engagement and learning over 1 billion users. And it's built on advanced technologies that can recreate reality down to the eyelash. This is what an eye looks like in a $50 video game. And this is what an eye looks like in a $250,000 medical simulator that you might find in a hospital. Looks like the veins were scribbled on in crayon by my 3-year-old. What did Elizabeth say earlier? Archaic? And so the gap between the state of the art in entertainment and the state of the art in healthcare is massive. And Level X has successfully closed that gap. So what we've been able to do is we've been able to use video game technology to change physician diagnostic and treatment behavior at scale. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So now for the live demo. So this is an example. This is an example from one of our products. You can actually download this in the App Store today. This is available on Android and iPhone. I'm actually controlling this on my iPad right now. So this is a recreation of a real patient case, and this is what we call an unforeseen scenario. So I have a wide range of tools at my disposal to go and remove polyps. In this particular case, I'll use a forceps, and what I don't realize is underneath that polyp is a blood vessel. And when it pops, it creates this massive unforeseen bleed. And so now I have to manage it. I have a wide range of tools, and the longer I take and the more blood the patient loses, the lower my score. So I can come in and I can choose argon plasma, coagulate the wound, but again, it's a totally virtual patient. I can continue to coagulate healthy tissue until my score drops low enough that I'm going to fail this case. And so again, a totally interactive virtual patient, not only for procedural cases, but for diagnostic ones as well. So as you can see, we have dozens of real cases submitted by doctors all over the country, some of which are CME accredited, so you can actually earn CME by doing diagnostic and decision-making procedures.
So we had doctors actually overwhelmingly tell us that they actually shifted into a clinical mindset when they were playing our video games. They actually were able to, they found it entertaining and they found it challenging and moving through these various case scenarios. And ultimately, by making it entertaining and challenging, it improves retention and improves their cognitive skills.
Right, so here you can see I'm actually making diagnostic decisions, I can make treatment decisions, and I'm getting information about the condition as I go. And so now I'm going to actually jump over to another one of our applications. This is our airway application. You can download this one as well. This is a case that actually was reported from here at Northwestern. A firefighter had run into a fire without his mask on. They put one on him later. They rushed him to the emergency room and they needed to intubate him. And so you can see what our technology looks like on a completely different anatomy set, different procedure. Here you can see his airway is filled with soot. You can even see it flowing around in the saliva. And all of the airway anatomy is totally swollen and friable. This is an almost impossible procedure to do unless you're using a fiber optic scope.
Ma'am, you're at time.
Oh. And so you can, imagine what this technology would look like applied to IPF to create a whole suite, a unit of cases that are designed to change physician behavior, change the way they diagnose and treat IPF.
Wow. So, is this yours, Sam? No,
Yeah.
that's.
Oh, that's theirs.
Okay. Couple questions. How would you distribute this to physicians to practice on it, to know about it? What's the distribution plan? How would physicians find out about it?
So doctors use smartphones and tablets every day in practice. And so by leveraging devices that they're already in their hands, we can actually take advantage of the App Store. So this is all distributed through mobile apps that are available for free worldwide. We're actually a top-ranked app, and both of our apps are top-ranked in the App Store. So that's the first way. We also invest in marketing to make sure we get the word out to increase adoption. But since they are mobile savvy and using this in and out of the point of care, it's actually rather easy to get a quick uptick and get that adoption.
Over 200,000 healthcare practitioners have already used it. So
200,000 have used the airway apps.
correct.
So, and do you see this as, when you say healthcare practitioners, I'm assuming you mean more than just doctors, right? As we know, primary care is changing in this country. Advanced practice nurses are becoming an important piece of this.
Exactly. So when we talked about anyone who's actually on the front lines that's treating a patient that's presenting with that, those symptoms like a cough, like chest pain, they would actually benefit from an application like this.
And tell me about the CME. So could this be certified as certified medical education? They could get hours for this? How does that work?
Yep, so today our apps are actually certified to offer CME, so doctors can actually play a video game and actually earn credits to maintain their license each year. So actually working closely with partners, we'd be able to offer CME for these pulmonology cases as well.
Any other questions from anybody? Great. You guys, thank you very much. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you don't understand the need for this, part of the problem is that a lot of primary care physicians have never seen a case like this, or if they have, maybe one in their life. So they aren't aware of IPF. The average length of time for diagnosis once first symptoms is 26 months. So it's really a case of figuring out what you don't have more than it is figuring out what you have. And I think the thing would be, if you change that dynamic, could you get people on therapy sooner, which would impact the quality of life? And our very last but not least, look at this guy, the American Thoracic Society, Dr. Fernando Martinez and Elvira Chavarria. Did I do it right? Whew, I got 1 out of 2.
Better than I do. I've been butchering her name of late. All right, so thanks for allowing me to be here. Dr. Heisey, who was supposed to give this presentation, couldn't come, so he asked me to do this 2 weeks ago. And I said, all right, Bob, I'll be glad to do it. But it actually ended up being remarkably topical because, let me see if I can advance this. All right, get no advance on here, Elizabeth.
Did we break it when I dropped it?
It was turned, that's why. I could have learned to turn it off. Right when he called me, I had just seen the patient on the left-hand side. Yvonne, this is a true case. 2 weeks ago, I'm sitting in the office and I see this young woman who has a history of diabetes who comes and tells me that she's had shortness of breath and cough for 2 years. She saw a pulmonologist in New York City who told her You have pulmonary fibrosis. There's nothing we can do. Take your prednisone for the cough and go home and die. That was her interpretation. All I could tell you is that as I was sitting there talking to her, in tears she was, reasonably so, I remember thinking, all right, guys, we got a problem here. There is clearly a problem when there are still things that are being done that shouldn't be done. There are things that should be done that are not being done. And we have to do this now. This is not something that we have the luxury of devoting 10 years to resolve. And for me in particular, it's particularly frustrating when I have spent 20 years working with the ATS, the American Thoracic Society, in generating a series of evidence-based guidelines on how to evaluate and how to treat. So the evidence is there for things to be able to do, but they're not being used. And so the component that Bob Heisey labeled as implementation gap, which is the idea of saying there are things that we know will work now and things that we know shouldn't be done, and how to be able to get to the community with what we currently have as our knowledge base of things to do and not to do. I think this is where I was intrigued by this partnership, because you've got the American Thoracic Society, which is the preeminent respiratory society globally. Gary, I'm biased. And it has a very strong patient advisory council. The PFF, they're in the back here, they're part of that council. This group, PCPI, happens to be a group that for decades has generated clinically relevant, robust practice guidelines and performance measures. So I'm sitting thinking, well, perfect opportunity to merge both of those two. The evidence base for care and how to generate recommendations for clinicians as to what should or should not be done. And that's, I think, how you guys suckered a group of us into actually partnering with you and trying to advise you. And so these are the folks that have written these guidelines, that have been involved in these clinical trials. As we've been talking, so for some of my physician colleagues, Yvonne, Greg, think about what you would consider as a reasonable performance measure. We've had all kinds of arguments about what that could include. And we thought, all right, you know what, maybe it could be pulmonary rehab, oxygen supplementation, transplant. But we actually have a methodologist who's going to tell us how to do that. That's one of the great partnerships here. Elvia.
Yes. Thank you.
Your turn.
Thank you.
And I'll finish it at the end. And I'll keep within your 2 minutes on your iPad.
Ooh, okay, so I'm with the PCPI, and we've been developing measures for quite a while now, as Dr. Martinez mentioned. And we use the best practices, and in fact, we have contributed to the best practices that are currently used now for developing measures. So our process in developing these measures were a chart translation of the clinical recommendations for implementation. And our process really consists of 2 phases. The first phase begins with the documentation of the gap in care or opportunities for improvement, much as we saw Dr. Martinez's patient experience in receiving the inappropriate care. Then we do a literature review to make sure that our measures are evidence-based, first and foremost. Then we bring together the technical expert panel. We have some of them already. And it's comprised of clinical experts, patients, methodologists, payers, and others. And then this is the group that really develops those measures along with the PCPI. Then in phase 2 of the measure development process, that's where we specify all of the data elements using standard clinical terminologies and the most current ones to make sure that our measures and each data element can be appropriately captured and generate the appropriate data via EHRs and via registries. Then we test our measures for feasibility, for reliability, and for validity to ensure we have a robust set of measures, because we can see that performance measures can improve not only performance but outcomes as well. On the right-hand side, you see improvement in performance, and on the left-hand side, you see improvement in outcomes by decreased hospital mortality.
All right, so I want to leave you with the final thoughts for you, okay? And that is, I want to be able to go back to this lady Daniela and tell her, now that we've merged 2 sets of expertise, I want to be able to give you a sense that we'll develop measures that will avoid that from happening, will encourage that from happening, and it has to occur now. And my final slide are comments from my colleagues who have been partners in this. I'll let you read those, because essentially the summary is, we have good care now, it just has to be done. And the ATS is most likely to do that, and this partnership between the ATS and the PCPI brings 2 levels of expertise together to be able to generate a series of measures that we can tell patients and clinicians, this is what should be done, this is what should not be done, and you need to do all that now. Thanks.
Why haven't they paid attention to him?
So this
I know that's a rhetorical question.
No, this is the discussion we had earlier, Tom, regarding why hasn't this occurred. Yvonne, are you aware of any performance measures in IPF? No. There are none.
What's the analog? What other disease states have performance
I've
measures?
actually developed performance measures in COPD, my other life. And in COPD, the performance measure is that you should measure pulmonary function if you're going to make the diagnosis. That took us quite a while to develop that, but it was actually eventually accepted. And then payers, this stick versus carrot approach, used it as a stick in being able to be able to.
So in other words,
reimburse.
you had to do that in order to get reimbursed for the care that you provided to that patient.
So the way that I would envision this is as with a partnership between ATS, folks in ATS, the expertise and methodology, we would come away with a series of recommendations that would include, for optimal care of your IPF patient, you should do. I'll let you decide what those are, because that's what she's going to do over the period of time. And then the ATS would encourage physicians. This is what's best care. These are the best performance measures. That's the carrot approach. You should really be a good physician, Elizabeth. You should do that. Eventually, Tom, it may come to a stick, where Gary, you are dealing with Medicare. He's our ATS government affairs representative. We'll end up with a situation where you will not be reimbursed for doing this if you don't do. We hope it doesn't come to that. We hope the carrot is enough to be able to alter care with things that we can currently do, guys, to be able to optimize our patients'
And would
lives.
this be pulmonologist-based, or would this be community physician? Everybody.
Who would you encompass as having your leadership or your advisory group?
Whoever sees IPF patients. It could be the pulmonologist, but then the patients can actually go first to their family physician. So it's a physician education for both.
I think that's going to require both participations.
We have a question here from Dr. Bach.
Dr. Bach. He's become an IPF doctor over the course of this last year.
Yep. So first and foremost, just so you guys all know, Fernando actually is this entertaining all the time.
Yeah, he is.
It's late in the days. You guys are hungry. We got to keep you up and running here.
So, generation of the practice guidelines is one thing, but the second thing is equally, if not more important, which is getting the word out, telling people, not forcing people, but again, it's the carrot and the stick. What other approach, perhaps from other industries, have we toyed with using to accelerate that? Because it really is practice guidelines, getting the world to use it.
So I would point out two things. So the first is that having access to a practice guideline within the construct of an organization which is a global organization, where a group of individuals, including primary care, I think that needs to be included, including pulmonary experts, comes and says, Ken, this is what you should do with your IPF patient. This is the minimum you should do. This is good care. I think that in itself is influential in a carrot respect to practicing clinicians. I don't think we can fully depend on that, although we don't have it in IPF right now. I think we can generate it, but we don't have it. I think that eventually what you're going to see is you don't have to go to another industry. This has been done in other components in healthcare, whether it's in cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease. That carrot approach works. What do you think? 40% of the time?
I would say so.
Unfortunately, Tom, there needs to at some point become a little bit of a stick component saying you must do this if you're going to be seen as an individual who's providing ideal care. That I think eventually will come. That takes a little longer. As Gary has told us from a Medicare perspective, that's a year endeavor trying to get something through, at least in the US for you European folks, our biggest payer.
Great. Oh, one more question. Yvonne?
Yep.
Microphone.
It would be helpful for people to understand the implications of this. Could you explain how providing a validated set of practices that could improve quality of life and outcomes, and how would that be helpful to the PFF as an organization that promotes best of care, or how would that be helpful to an individual patient with family who's looking for a validated resource of what they should be getting in the clinic?
All right, so let me tell you two things. The first thing is, let me tell you the story with this woman that I saw. All right, she's 66, very young for those of us that have birthdays recently. It's a child, And so this individual, Yvonne, after spending an hour and a half in my office in tears with her family because she was told she had a fatal disorder, turns out she had had an inappropriate CT scan. Where's our radiologist in the back there? Not following your criteria for how to do a CT scan. No one had done a thorough history. If you had done that, Roses, you would have come up with the conclusion that she did not have pulmonary fibrosis. She had chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis. She had spent the last 6 weeks selling her belongings, giving her family belongings away for a disorder that has a much different prognosis and therapeutic implication. If they had followed the ATS guideline that's about to be released, which is a 2018 diagnostic guideline, that would hopefully not have happened. So I would argue that that is a very practical component. We need clinicians that evaluate these patients to understand. This is what you need to do for a patient in whom you suspect IPF, not have your wife try to figure out why you have a cough. And so that is a very practical component. From the PFF perspective, we've already talked to Greg about this with the PFF. So when you look at what Elvia has put up there, if I were the PFF, my PFF colleagues back there, I would think about this and go, what a perfect opportunity as a beta site for potential measures to be implemented across 43 sites and generate quite a bit of data regarding how that's being used, how it would be modified. It's ideal, Gary, for the PFF as part of the PAR through the ATS to be a key participant in this. Now, mind you, Yvonne, you're a PFF site. I'm not sure that you need that level of education or me telling you, Dr. Roses, you must make sure there's an inspiratory, expiratory CT and prone and supine. But I can tell you there are a lot of people in your area that are not part of your PFF site who don't do that currently and manage the bulk of the IPF patients. That's where I think this kind of a performance measure would have an impact for those physicians. Okay. This is what you need to do with what we currently have. Not dependent on fancy additional methodologies, all of which I hope work for you guys. Hope they all work. But what we currently have, guys, do at least that so that we know that we've standardized care and our patients are getting the best possible care that we currently have. I do not want to have to spend another hour and a half talking to a poor woman who thought she was going to die and sold off all her family belongings because someone did not have a performance measure telling them, get the right CT.
So, just so you know,
patients will be involved in this. Sorry, Elizabeth.
You're good.
You get me all passionate now.
I've never not seen you this way, Fernando. You ought to have dinner with them.
Unfortunately, she's heard all my life stories. And so patients need to be engaged from the very beginning in all of this, which is why patients are included and which is why I think the PFF in particular provides advice. I think patients should have access to all of this.
Yeah.
So if at some point you're concerned about this, you should be able to say, but I thought the performance measure says you should be doing this and this. Why am I doing this and this? I think that's perfectly appropriate. Use it within your modules. Yes, Teresa. We're holding back dinner now, so.
Right. Right. Woohoo! ATS, as Teresa's pointing out, the American Thoracic Society is the largest group of pulmonary doctors in the world. Yeah.
Correct. Which you have been a part of for a long time.
Okay. Right. So understanding the problem, and we got to thank you guys very much. Fernando.
We're way over the 5 minutes.
Yeah, no doubt. But you had questions, so I'm going to give you a break on that.
All right.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to get to, what we're going to do is, before we get to Bill and Yvonne, they're going to bring some chairs up here. You're going to be able to ask some questions as well. So if you have some questions for Bill Vick, who I mentioned, PF warrior out of Dallas, Texas. He is well known in this space. What I wanted Yvonne, Dr. Yvonne Rosas from Brigham and Women's Hospital and Bill to talk about is what they just saw, what you all just saw, and why it would impact Bill as a patient and Yvonne as a clinician. So let's have a conversation. Please ask a couple of questions. We're going to do that, and the judges are going to go in the back and tally this up. But before that, I have a special treat for you. Mr. Hervis, would you like to come up here? Tom Hervis has decided he wants to say something tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, the reason we're here, Tom Hervis.
Well, thank all of you for coming tonight. And I don't want to be sitting here next year at the same position thinking, well, how can we help patients? How can we help the caregivers? How can we educate people? I say in my history of doing things, talk is cheap. So this is an incredibly good and rewarding conference. Every one of the 9 contestants that we have up here, much less the 82 or whatever other number, has had something to say, and there's a lot of good pieces everywhere. But then we have to make a decision, and we have to do this. We have to communicate to the industry out there, to the patients, the caregivers, the doctors, the hospitals, that here's the solution, here's how you handle these things. And we have to give the patient, by the end of the year, the confidence that I can make it, and I can get out of my house, and there's hope for me. Because without hope, without being able to get out of the house, you know, pretty horrible existence. This is not like finding a therapy. This is not like finding the cause. This is a question of just talking to each other. We got a lot of good people here, a lot of good ideas, and then communicating this to the patients, the caregivers, the hospitals. This can be done. This is not rocket science. But the important thing here is that I appreciate all of you coming here, talking to each other, exchanging ideas, and there's no question that we can do this. And next year at this time, we should be sitting here celebrating champagne, thinking, guess what we did? I'm sick and tired of, and obviously I have a big stake in this, but sick and tired of people not knowing. Horrible disease. As many people die from this as breast cancer, and who cared over the years, okay? But now all of you are here. There's a lot of good ideas, really good ideas here. We can do this. It's a question of, in a way, selling the patients, the caregivers, the doctors, that this works, and we can help the quality of life. So I'm really excited about talking to all of you, and I think, wow, there's a lot of good ideas. You talk to each other. How do we put together the best puzzle here? And there's no reason this can't be done. We're not looking at, it's great if we find the therapy, and hopefully we'll do that soon, but communicating this to the patients and the caregivers, we can do this. And if we don't, we should all be ashamed, and there's no use even having another meeting. It's pretty,
No champagne?
it's pretty silly. But anyway, thank all of you. I've had good discussions with a lot of you, and I plan to have more discussions. Let's get it done, okay? Talk is cheap. Thank you.
All right, for those of you at home watching and those of you in the room, here's your URL, and so you can vote or you can wait for a few minutes. We're going to start the timer right now. You have 10 minutes. These guys are going to talk about what they heard, but if you had a favorite, please go to pollev.com/IPFCC, all caps, and you're going to be able to vote. And again, one time, not the Chicago way of voting, one time, that's it. And we'll have 10 minutes and we'll tally it up, and the judges will be right back, and I'm going to let these guys have a conversation. So, really quickly, Dr. Yvonne Rosas from Brigham and Women's, Bill Vick. I want you guys to talk about what you heard, what you saw, and what excites you about tonight.
Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, Bill.
Hey, bye.
Good to see you again. Do you want to say a couple words and then I'll follow?
Sure. I'm going to approach this a little differently if I can. I understand there's 2 amazing things in my being here. One is the fact that I'm here, period. As like many patients, I was told when I was diagnosed, you're going to be dead in 2 years, go home, get your affairs in order, and that was 7 years ago. Secondly is my good friend Elizabeth Estes, 20 minutes ago, standing in the hallway, says, oh, by the way, you and Dr. Yvonne Rojas are going to talk for 10 minutes as a filler. And I said, thank you, Elizabeth. As a patient, I see this differently. I really do. And I know there's a lot of really smart minds here and bright people with great ideas. I was one of the judges, and I saw this huge funnel of 300 companies that came forward with ideas and creations and insights and tools and technologies. And you saw some of them. And it kind of boiled down to the ones that went through the gauntlet, and the 60-some companies that actually went through an application process, which was very rigorous and very intense. And then it was judged by a panel of 20-some people. And then it boiled down to these 9 winners or finalists that are here tonight. And I call them all winners. I think the 300 people are winners personally. I think they are changing the dynamics of what it means to have pulmonary fibrosis. I think their ideas are showing us as patients we can only expect 2 things out of this whole thing as patients. 2 things. And 2 things are easy. It's 2 words. Each word is 4 letters. And the first word is hope. You're going to give us hope. And secondly is help. Give us help. And I saw in this meeting, in the people I've talked to, in the groups I've sat with and looked at and thought about, we have hope and we now have help. So I want to applaud all of you, each and every one of you that are here, because you're making it possible. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with Stephen, what you've done with Matter. I've seen what Tom and have done, Dr. Rojas, what you've done with your team, and everybody here. I'm just overwhelmed, and I said this before when they talked about one of the oxygen products. I'm quivering excitement if it was made. I'm quivering with excitement for the people here that are doing what they've done. And I look around and I see we have the senior leadership from the American Lung Association. We have the senior leadership from the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. And they're in back of us and with us, and they're kind of marching in the same direction. And I just think I want to say to you guys collectively, you're all winners, every one of you. We win as patients. The entrance, whether you walk away with the prize, is immaterial. You've won by helping us and giving us
Thanks, Bill. It's really all about the patient, and I think that there's nothing better for a physician to sit side to side with a patient and be reminded why, in my case, for example, the last 25 years, like many of the folks who actually came today, I've been thinking about IPF. But I think Fernando will agree that sometimes, and many years ago, we felt like Bill was saying, that we were kind of alone thinking about IPF. And having met Tom and having met Elizabeth and Bill and the other members of the Three Lake Partners group was very refreshing, because although there was a strong connection and a reason for them to be involved, it was really inspiring to see people who really have no agenda, but that to help patients and help us as providers to help patients. So this is something that's been very refreshing for me. I've had the fortune of doing a lot of things in medicine, take care of patients, do research, interact with companies, but I think this is special because, again, I really think in addition to seeing patients, probably one of the things that I've now enjoyed most is actually working with people who are interested in helping patients I take care of. So I want to thank the Three Lake Partners group for doing this. The second thing I think is really important is to highlight how inspired, like Bill, I was with reading the applications and seeing the focus, interest, innovation, and really cool ideas that I had never thought about. I said, wow, that's a good idea. That's something that could really help my patient. And these 10 presentations today are a good example of that, but trust me, there were many others that also could have really made us think about how we can improve the care of our patients. And not only physicians, but many people in industry or many organizations who are present today should continue to think this way. How can we really catalyze the management of our patients, or improvement of the management of our patients? How can we help this community? And again, I think by being here, you're demonstrating that it can be done. I only have a couple of minutes, and I think, like Fernando did, I think the best thing to bring the message home is let me tell you about 2 cases that I've seen recently, which kind of highlights why some of the technologies that are proposed today may be of very important use. First one was a patient who actually I saw today at noon. I was actually flying out to Chicago for a meeting, this meeting, and I was seeing him in follow-up. I had seen him recently, a month ago, and had planned to see him 3 months after that initial visit, which is what I routinely did. I was visiting my family back in Colombia when he had actually called back and said he was not feeling well, and spoke with one of my colleagues. And he was assessed at that time, but I was not present, so he was coming for a follow-up meeting. And it was very clear that he had had a fairly rapid trajectory in terms of the onset of his disease, but during my absence, he had a sudden decline in his lung function. It was really clear that he had what one of our presenters called an acute exacerbation. And he could actually barely breathe while he was talking to me. And I was a little bit concerned because while he was speaking to me, he didn't have his oxygen on. Are you on oxygen? He said, yeah, I was using oxygen at sleep. I said, no, are you on oxygen now on a regular basis? And he told me he was. He had recently been prescribed this oxygen after this episode, and he pulled out this very small device. It was this big, probably this thick, very light. And this was actually his oxygen supply for 3 to 4 hours. I remember, Fernando, when I started actually taking care of IPF patients, it was the 2 vials of liquid oxygen that we were seeing here. So technology is really important and has really changed the life of patients with IPF. And this patient now can basically walk the hallway with a very small device that actually can allow him to enjoy his life and exercise, which is very important for IPF. So not only the oxygen technologies that have been presented today, but many of the ideas that are being set forth that may or may not win the prize are important for patients with IPF. And we should try to support and promote the development of these technologies, even if they're not awarded the prize today. Those of you who actually applied and have these ideas pushed through, I think these are great ideas, and you should really continue to make an effort to develop them. One that's close to my heart was actually another patient who I saw 2 weeks ago, and he's a patient who's taken care of by the other hospital across town. But I had seen him for a second opinion 3 years ago. Wonderful gentleman. Both of these patients are highly educated. And he came because he wanted to follow up on me. He had actually been at the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation meeting a couple months ago, and we had an opportunity to chat, and he had promised he was going to come back to see me. It's a very interesting case. It's a gentleman in his 70s who actually started developing cough and went to see his providers, and they provided excellent care and ended up finding that he had very minimal changes in his CT scan. And so they were so minimal that it was actually hard to make the diagnosis of IPF. For his age and other reasons, he did not undergo a biopsy, but it was assumed or presumed that he had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And when I saw him, I actually agreed with that assumption. Although it was very atypical, I thought that because of his age and other factors, he probably had the disease, and that one of the medications had just been approved. So he was one of the unique situations in which we are actually treating a patient who had early stage disease with these novel therapies. Fortunately, as was mentioned before, he was not one of these patients who actually had side effects. He's one of the 50% of patients who do not have side effects. And I was seeing him 3 years later, and I had the opportunity to see something wonderful, which was CT scans and breathing tests over the last 3 years, in which it was clear that there was absolutely no decline in his lungs. That's remarkable. That's not IPF, is what many of my colleagues would say. But there is a discrete possibility that if we actually do early diagnosis, we actually may be able to intervene at a time in which the progression of disease may be stabilized. Maybe this can become diabetes or hypertension. That's at least the dream. And so there's a couple of technologies today that address this, not only in terms of imaging, but also in terms of how one should be approaching the diagnosis of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. I've seen a transformation over the last 15 years on how we approach this disease. As Fernando's patient was told, she would have to go and fix her affairs. That was the standard when I actually started practicing. That is not the standard that we train our young physicians to actually provide patients with IPF now. As Bill said, the most important thing as we're training this new generation of physicians is to teach these physicians to provide hope to their patients, to be aggressive when necessary in terms of management and making sure that they get the most appropriate therapies. And most importantly, to provide hope to patients that we do have a large community, today even larger, that's really focused on trying to improve their quality of life, trying to find better therapies. Transplant is great, but we want to get rid of transplant. We want to find medications that actually can control this disease. So again, I just want to wrap up by saying, as Bill said, that we're really grateful for all the applicants, all the effort that was put forth, even coming back to Chicago to actually do this presentation. And I'd really like to give a big round of applause to all the applicants, not only the ones that came. Are there any questions for Bill or myself?
Oh, good. I do have one comment. It kind of ties into what you're saying, Dr. Rojas, and I think that Dr. Martinez said it. I think at some point, we forget, we patients, we forget we were people before we were patients. And I think doctors and care professionals forget that as well. And the thing I like to see tonight here was the engagement of companies recognizing the solutions they're investigating include the dynamic of the patient interaction, because patients are this incredible resource. There's 150,000 of us out there, and we come in all sizes, shapes, and flavors, but without exception, I can tell you that all of us want the same thing. Help us find a cure, help us live with this disease or live better, and help us find a cure. So I think we all feel the same way. And I think that sometimes we forget as ourselves that we were and are people first. We have ideas and thoughts, and let us share our input with you and tap into us and use us. You know, kind of take advantage of us while we're young and innocent, okay? But use us. And we're here as patients. There's 600 support groups around the United States in various stages of support for pulmonary fibrosis. Hopefully, we'll see all of those support groups speak the same language. Heard some of those languages today. I think it's possible. So again, not to piggyback on what you're saying, I think you guys collectively and gals really deserve an applause for what you've done, because it's changed lives. It's going to save lives.
Our 10 minutes are over.
Are you locked?
How was it? How'd they do?
It was good.
Oh, yeah.
So they're tabulating as we speak. Where's Dr. Bonham? Kathy Bonham from University of Chicago. Where is she? I know she's here somewhere. There she is. We got to meet Dr. Bonham, as mentioned. Ken and I have been around the world meeting some of these amazing clinicians. And I want to say, I said this the day that we had our event here, these clinicians do this unheralded on a disease that no one knows about, that isn't funded properly. And they have done it because they care about their patients, and they do it because they desperately want to help. And Kathy came in tonight, and she said, "Elizabeth, good to see you." And she gave me a hug, and she said, "I just came from clinic, and I'm with 2 patients who are in the ICU with IPF." And she said, I told them that I was coming to see the future for them. So for all of you, all 9 of you who were up here tonight, we are blown away. It was a tough decision, and we're going to come back in here in just a couple minutes, and we will let you know who the winners are. But as we mentioned, none of you walk away here tonight without knowing that we are going to support you in what you've done. You've shown us a lot, and you've led the way, so we're really super appreciative. And Bill, I'm certain that you and Yvonne had a robust discussion, and I'm so sorry I missed it.
Good discussion.
It was a good discussion?
I think so.
A very good discussion. Well, again, Bill Vick has seen and talked to more patients and more people, and Teresa Barnes over here, also another patient advocate. You guys see it firsthand. So I know that you have seen the conversation rising among people understanding and learning what IPF is. So a lot of that is due to you.
If I can, just, Elizabeth, there's another ingredient here, and I wish Tom was here to say it to Tom as well, and Ann, I know you can say it for me. And you, Elizabeth Estes, I am so sorry. Elizabeth.
This guy.
She is.
I know you like that I buy you good wine, but you can stop.
No, and you have nice shoes, but she is truly awesome. And Ken, same thing, laser focused, sharp as a tack, gets the job done. It has been such an honor and pleasure to kind of work with you guys as a team. It has been awesome.
So I think you guys got a sense of Tom's personality tonight, and Tom and his family and his daughters. You know, they're the ones that helped us do this. They're the ones that are a motivator. But Tom makes you believe anything is possible. He just does. And he's done that for this entire year, and he's an amazing guy.
You know what he said when I was talking? I have to share this with you, and I'm not taking this out of school, Ann, but he said, I said, you know, this is kind of a race. He says, yeah, but we're just at the start.
All right, well, they're coming back in. So, guys, here they are. All right. Oh, look at there. Fancy envelopes. There's not going to be any wardrobe malfunctions or anything with this, right? We're good. I'll say, before we give these, here we go. Dr. Ken Bach, our managing director of Three Lakes Partners, would like to say a few words. He doesn't get the microphone very often when I'm around, so I'm going to hand this to him.
I'd first like to thank those who made tonight possible. Elizabeth, I know you walked away, but thanks to you and your team for your leadership, as well as just a massive amount of effort. Thank you to our key partners, Matter. IDEO wasn't mentioned before. I'm going to mention it now. And especially Jason, where did you go? Jason and Common Pool, my goodness. And our thanks to each of you for making it out tonight, and for those that are online for sharing in our effort. And most importantly, Tom, thanks to you and your family for your vision, your energy, and your commitment. So, although we are in this room together, pushing innovative ideas and being entrepreneurs, it's oftentimes a lonely journey. And it kind of starts like this: a good idea, a single entrepreneur, and with sheer will and energy and capital and oftentimes seemingly naive courage, we push this uphill. And if we're lucky, we're joined by partners and colleagues and friends. And then over there, that happens again. And again, if we're lucky, we're joined by partners and colleagues and friends. And then again, and again. Our responsibility at Three Lakes, it's to find you. It's to help you find us so that we can support you and connect you not only to each other, but to a larger ecosystem of resources so that we can each increase the chance that we're successful, so that we can leverage off each other, and so that in the end, ideally, we can become greater than the sum of our parts. And together, the hope is that our ecosystem returns those parts that IPF has taken, returns to patients and to caregivers true living. And tonight is another step in that direction. At Three Lakes, this is who we are. And I would argue, as of now, this is who we are. So with that, thank you. And I don't know about you, I'd like to find out who won.
All right, are we ready? So we're going to start with the audience polling. For those of you at home who were watching and voted, wow, these are big checks, literally and figuratively. And for those of you in here who voted, this will be the vote getter, highest vote getter who isn't one of the top three. Okay? So congratulations to Level X. Tom always says, have fun, give away money. So that's why we decided to add the extra voting tonight. We thought it would be fun for everybody to have a chance to vote on that winner. So very excited. Congratulations, Level X. Very excited for what you guys have been able to do. Ken, you want to come on up? Come on up with Tom. All right. And I'm going to read these in alphabetical order. The three winners of the $333,333.33. If anybody's got a penny, I need to split that up between the other three, so I'll make that right, I promise. We're a penny short. But the three winners are Advanced Interactive Response System, AIRS. Second winner, Owlstone Medical. Hang on, we'll get Tom over here with you guys. A lot of checks. Stay there, stay there. And our final winner of the first IPF Catalyst Challenge, Patient Empower. We'll get these pictures. Everybody, thank you so much for your attention, for your passion, for your caring. For the rest of you, it's not over. It's not over. And please go eat and drink. So thank you very much, everyone at home. Thank you for watching. Good night.